Okay, shall we start then?
Do it.
Gentlemen, best behavior this evening. Fair warning, I'm recording you, and it will be put up on YouTube because that one guy asked if he said he'd been watching our videos and he wanted to know if we'd be doing tires. So that's why I suggest that then we do tires this evening.
Yeah, but it's a good subject for sure.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, guys, so topic for tonight, truing tires. And as you can see from the picture, this evening's chat would really be limited to a tire raiser. Some of the principles apply to things like the single wheel truers, like the hoodie or huddy or whatever you're supposed to pronounce it. And then there are a number of other similar on-axle truers like the Area 3, there's a Scale Auto one, etc. So whatever we chat about on the tire raiser, that would apply equally to other on-axle truers to a greater or lesser extent. Okay, so what are we trying to achieve? My biggest achievement is I just got my wife to bring me a cup of coffee. Thanks. We want to, if you want to see what a good tire looks like, have you ever looked at what a Paul gauge tire looks like when it comes to you? I mean, it is beautifully,
I did.
Absolutely smooth and glossy. I personally believe that with a urethane or a rubber tire, if you could have this kind of surface, if you feel it's sticky, it's tacky, it grips like you wouldn't believe. The problem with it, of course, it isn't round when you get it on the wheel. It's both not concentric with the axle, and it's also not flat across the width of the tire. So the surface is wonderful, but unfortunately the shape of it sucks. So to my mind, almost the ideal for a tire is to get it looking as smooth and glossy and sticky as it comes out of the mold, but to have it perfectly concentric, perfectly round, perfectly concentric with the axle, and perfectly flat across the width. So that's sort of in a nutshell what I think we'll be trying to do. So to start off, where do you start? First things first, you've got to glue the tires to the wheels. And I'm going to talk this evening only about metal wheels, not plastic wheels on axles. We can touch on that a little bit later towards the end, just briefly. But really, I wanted to, because this covers all of the good things we want to achieve. So when you start, you end up with your wheels, you end up with your tires. The first thing that I suggest you do is, take a look at these tires. They stick together. Good grief. Wash the tires to get rid of the mold release compound. Use just a regular dishwashing liquid. Don't use hand soap that has lanolin or anything like that in it, because that would defeat the object. Clean the wheel with alcohol. And if you're doing Paul gauge tires, you would notice that there's an outside and an inside. The inside is a bit rough, the finish, and now the focus won't focus. So as it comes, you'll see that the inside finish is a bit rough and the outside is beautifully smooth. So get the outside on the outside and the inside on the inside. I thought I'd give you some inside information on tire touring, so we have an outside chance of doing it properly. And make sure, roll it between your fingers to make sure that you seat it properly, because if you have the right tire for the right wheel, the rib on the wheel would fit well in the groove in the tire. So you've got to make sure that it doesn't get hung up in any way, shape, or form. Okay. We have two wheels with tires. How do I glue it? There's any number of ways if you read on the forums. And Blair has just arrived. If you read on the forums, there's as many forum members as there are that many different ways that people tend to glue tires. I have found the simplest is I use LePage Ultra Gel. Part of the reason is, man, I wish this thing would focus better. There's a number of reasons why I use this. I use CA because I think it's better than nail varnish. I've not had a tire come loose ever using this. The second reason why I use it is because it has a nozzle like this. This, to me, makes applying the glue dead simple. How do I do it? You have the tire, you peel the tire back a little bit, and you stick the nozzle. Let's see. You stick the nozzle in the gap between the tire and the wheel. Can you guys see it on the video?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then all you do is you've got to learn how much to stick in, because then you squeeze some glue, and I'm going to make it difficult for you to see now because otherwise I can't do it properly. So you squeeze some and you rotate, and you run a bead of glue all around. With this nozzle, it is a piece of old tacky to do. The only trick is you've got to get a feel for how much glue to stick in so that it doesn't end up squishing out at the end. So you run it right around. And then again, you roll it between your fingers to make sure that it is seated well. If you do it properly, you will see that there's a little bit of glue that's been extruded out between the tire and the wheel. And you've got to try and get some, not just on the shoulder, you know, the flat side, but on the rib, so that it glues everything together. I do both wheels like this, and then I have to do it now because otherwise I'll forget what I've done. What I typically do after I've glued I start on the outside because the outside is the most important. Let there be no doubt about that. The inside is important, but the outside is critical. What I then do is I set it aside for a few hours for the glue to cure. And then I glue the inside edge. Give it a few hours to cure, and then I true the tires. Okay?
Are you working on rubber or urethanes right now?
Urethane,
These are urethanes. These
Paul gauge.
because I thought, you know, 97% of my tires are urethanes, and probably 100% of yours are urethanes. So I wouldn't mess around with rubber tires because they're a pain in the ass.
Tell me about it.
As my good friend Mr. Day has learned to his regret.
But it's still the same process to glue them on.
Everything is pretty much exactly the same, except the process is just a little bit more difficult with rubber tires.
Okay.
And polishing is absolutely hypercritical with rubber tires. I mean, the only reason why you would use rubber tires is to get the very, very, very best performance. You can, for regular club use like we do, you don't have to go to the extremes that I would go to for a proxy, for instance. We'll talk, I'll mention where I diverge from that level of preparation as we go through the process. So just bear that in mind. Okay, so as an example, what I wanted to do is, this is a former proxy car that I hate it when the camera doesn't want to focus.
Are you using a phone or an actual camera, Alwyn?
It's an actual camera.
Hmm.
There we go. So this is one of my proxy cars that had rubber wheels on it, and what I wanted to do, and it's decided the camera now to focus on something else, whatever the hell it is that it found so interesting. Okay, so I had a set of pre-glued used urethanes that were too big, so I thought I'd use this as an example for tonight's truing exercise. You can see the wheels are way too big in the wheel arches here. So the first thing that you have to do when you start truing is to decide what diameter do you have to true it to. The way that I do that is you get the setup block that Jamie is so desirous of. You put your car on that and you take a look at how high it is. The best way to do this is to actually measure the height. How do you measure it? I use metric drill bits. So you start with a thinner one and you go progressively up until I slide the drill bit under the car. And this is a 2 mil drill bit because I sort of did some preparations ahead of time. And yeah, this is annoying that the camera doesn't want to focus where I want it to focus. But in any case, what you do is stick the drill bit under here and you experiment until you get the right diameter drill bit. Okay, it's typically we have 0.5 millimeter increments, but at least you can see it's slightly more than 2 millimeters, slightly less than 2 millimeters, a bit more than 1.5, so you can get an idea. And typically when you put new tires on, it's typically that gap is going to be something like 2.5 millimeters. So now you know how high the bottom of the car is off the ground. When you start doing your truing, you have to decide how high do you want the bottom of the chassis to be off the ground when you're done. In this case, this car is about 2 millimeters off. I'd like it to be like 1.5. I typically would like cars to be between 1 and 1.5 millimeters off the track. Any lower than that, and as the tires wear, you start getting them dragging, and also it's if it's higher than that, then you lose out on handling. So what?
So between one and 1.5 is acceptable.
1.5 is probably the golden, you know, what I typically aim for, Jamie.
Okay.
So now you have to true it to that dimension to get that. So the question, of course, is how the heck do you know how much how much to take off. How I do that is I measure the diameter of the wheel. And this is where I say, all of you have one of these, don't you? And you all say, yes, definitely we have one of these.
Yes, absolutely.
Because this is one of the absolute, it's just something that you absolutely have to have. And when it comes to measurement, I mean, the simple way is that you do this. But it is very inaccurate for a number of reasons. If you get the tire cocked at an angle, I exaggerate now, then you're getting a diameter that's way bigger than the actual. If you squish it down too hard, you get less than what the actual diameter is. So if you want to get as close as possible to an accurate dimension, this is what I do. I lay the tire on the legs of the calipers, and then I slowly open it. I'll do it quickly now. Until
it
falls through. So this is 21.8 millimeters. How accurate can you get it? I feel I can consistently get an accurate reading to within 1/10 of a millimeter. Is that good enough? Very good question. I think so. Because part of the problem, and now we'll touch, Jamie, on the comment that you made, is that with a tire raiser, the one leg is up in the air and the other one is down on the ground. You don't get the two tires the same diameter. If you take a look at my razor, you'll see that I've hacked the hell out of it on these in my endeavors to get them, to get the axle, you know, the bushings and the axle to be perfectly horizontal. Sorry, I'm taking a swig of coffee. And how perfect is perfect? What I aim for is to get the two tires within 1/10 of a millimeter of each other. Where did I come up with that number? I pulled it out of my brain. And we all know where my brain is.
Third hole.
Eh?
Nothing, I'm watching television.
I feel that if you're like a millimeter out, you know, the slot cars don't have differentials. If you have a big wheel on the one side and a small wheel on the other side, it's always going to try to go turn. My sense was, if I can get it to within 1/10 of a millimeter on around 20 millimeters diameter, that's like within 0.5%. I think that should be, that's adequately good. Is it possible to get it? Yes, I get it with a tire raiser consistently. Yes. Once you have these filed out well and you don't mess around with it, you can get within 1/10 of a millimeter consistently. Okay. The next thing we need to do, we need to get the tires on here. And now I have to figure out where's the hole. That's the one disadvantage of the CB design wheels. It's a pain to get to the set screws. Okay. Now the next question is, how far apart do you stick the wheels on the axle? Any thoughts?
For what, Ellen, for putting it on the razor?
Yeah, when you put it on the axle like this,
Okay.
how far apart do you put them? You know, do you put them way, you know, or do you just put them on and whatever it is, it is?
Equidistant either side.
Same size as the car you're going to put it on.
There you go, Kevin. That to me is very important. So I typically set it up so that it fits in the car the way that it would fit when you put it together. Why is that important? If you have the axle is going to be a little bit, even with 1/10 of a millimeter, it's going to be at a slight angle. If you have the tires further apart than what it would be on the car, and you true it onto a flat surface, then there's a perfectly flat line over the flat of the tires, the two tires. But if you change the distance between them, you would find that the tires are, the one tire would be riding on the inside and the other tire would be riding on the outside. The tires don't ride perfectly flat on the ground. Does everybody get that?
Yep.
Yeah.
So to me, to perfectly true a tire and then to have it, say riding on the inside edge and outside edge, that sort of largely defeats the whole object of truing. Is this critical in a club racing environment? Yeah, if you're going to be a couple of millimeters out one way or the other, I really don't think it's that important.
If you want to beat you, we're going to have to.
But sorry, what?
If we want to beat you, we're going to have to.
You're never going to beat him, I'm sorry to tell you.
Well, I feel you've got to put the wheels on the axle, so you can just as well put them in the right place. It's not hard, it's not extra work or whatever, so do it right. Are you going to win half a second a lap with that? No. Might it gain you 0.05 of a second consistently? I think that's quite possible. Does 0.05 of a second count? In a proxy, you bet your bottom dollar.
But Elwin, wouldn't it be advantageous to keep the wheels closest to those little two support brackets? Because if there is a discrepancy between, like, with the parallel issue between the sandpaper and the axle, the further they're apart, the bigger the discrepancy in the diameter. Whereas when they're closer to the two little brackets, they're going to be more similar in diameter, aren't they?
More closer. If you're
Yes.
not going to make it, if you're not going to put it at the width of the car, that would be second best.
Okay. Carry on.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so I'm quite sure there was a little hole here somewhere,
Look at the little notch on the rim.
which is all well and good unless you've glued in a wheel trim like that.
All right. Isn't it on the edge of the rim?
Yeah, but this extends past the edge of the rim. The trim that I have covers it.
All right. All
So
right.
that's a real pain in the lower back.
Yeah.
All righty then. This is uncomfortable. I'll move everything back to the way that it is good for the video camera afterwards, because to do it, this kind of nonsense with your arms bent akimbo.
A really nice watch you got there, Alwyn.
I'm glad you had the time to see it. Okay. Next thing is this rubber band puts quite a bit of force on the bushings. So please remember to oil the bushings. Otherwise, you'd start scoring the axle, you'd start wearing the bushings, all of those bad kind of things. So now we have to start truing. Tyre razor comes with one of these for the sandpaper. I ordered some extra, so I actually have 3 of these. So I have one coarse one medium fine one, and one ridiculously fine one. Is it necessary to have 3? No. 2 is very handy. You'll see that I only have 2 over here because, quite frankly, after I bought 3, I've decided I pretty much get by with just 2. So the question is, what grit? What grit do you use, Wes?
I finished with 600.
What do you start with?
Start?
60.
60.
60.
I
That's
tell you, I do it in 30 minutes. There's
That's
no-
aggressive.
Yeah.
yeah. You're a cut above the rest. You're definitely
you.
a cut above me. This is 150, and this is 320.
Perfect.
Is that the law of the Medes and the Persians? Of course not. It's just stuff that I found works reasonably well for me. I'm a little bit leery of very coarse, because then if you're not careful, you end up with, after you do your rough cut, you end up with a very rough surface. If you then go to 600, it's damn difficult to get rid of the irregularities left by a 50. So I find 2 things. If I use the 150, it does get the stuff off relatively quickly. Obviously not as quickly as you did, Wes, but it's okay. And if I do some slow sort of polishing with a 150 at the end, the surface is pretty damn good actually, and you can get a very good polish with a 600. With a 320. And if I say you can get a good polish, let's see, can you see? This is the.
Are you getting that
the
polish
rubber
with
tires?
the 3?
One of the rubber tires I did today.
Are you getting that with the 320?
Yep.
Fantastic.
And that's a rubber tire.
Yes.
That
And
after
sorry?
is that after you've treated it, or is that just straight off the sander?
This has been cleaned with lighter fluid,
Okay.
but the surface, even with 320, which is relatively coarse, you can get pretty damn smooth without any visible scores in it. Is it perfect? Obviously not. Otherwise, I would have done better in proxies.
320 is a good finish, though. I've found.
Where's what I found is I couldn't get really any improvement going with a 600 after the 320. You polish for 40 days and 40 nights, and you can hardly see a difference between what it was and what it then is.
I've actually found in detailing, I've actually found a 3000 grit that I was going to try. And
Yeah,
see
I've got stuff. I've got some at Lee Valley Tools. You can get 3M sandpaper down to 5 microns.
Isn't that something else?
Guys, I got to tell you, I think that's the perfect solution to a non-existent problem. For club racing, I would never bother with anything better than 320. I might even just finish with 150 and leave it be. Because you can get a pretty damn good surface with 150. Okay, after all this talk, we should actually do some truing. So let's see what happens. Let's see if it turns out. Are you ready? And part of the question now is, how fast, what voltage? And I run the Tyre razor typically at about 4.5 volts. And you can see it starts taking the stuff off pretty quickly. And I just barely started. I can bog it down almost, and then you'll see that it takes the material off pretty rapidly.
What kind of amps do you have on that thing, Ellen?
I currently don't know.
Okay. So
So
it could
the
be
amps,
10.
I think, the amps, I think, are automatic on those power supplies.
Yeah, I have a very small regulated power supply, Ross.
Oh, okay.
It's a cheapie that I got off eBay. It's a Chinese little box thing.
All right.
I have the same one, and they're fantastic.
Yeah, I've got the
I
same
think
one also. It's got a digital display.
Yeah, for what we need to. Now I can reach. It's one of these.
Oh no, mine's different.
Best $29 I ever spent.
Yeah, it is dirt cheap, and it works. I've
Have a good conversation.
very many tires with it.
It's gorgeous, isn't it?
Beautiful.
So this is one of the drawbacks of the Tyre razor. It might be part of my hacking the notch for the bushings. It does tend to chatter a bit on occasion. If you listen carefully, you can hear the whine.
So right now you're chewing one tire smaller than the other, correct?
No. What I'm doing here, what I have here is that the two tires weren't the same size to start.
Gotcha.
So I have to grind off more of the one to get it to the same size as the other. I hate this.
Alwyn, do you find that it takes a lot of passes then? I mean, normally when you sand, once you've sanded down to a depth, it stops, but it would appear to keep going on beyond that point.
No, this is it'll stop if I carry on without screwing down the thing. It'll stop at removing material. It's just because rubber is flexible. It has give.
Yeah.
So it'll only take off a certain amount. The rest it will sort of lean away. So you have to, as you go along, you'll add feed to it.
But you could listen to the RPM of the motor and know how much or how fast you've taken off, right?
Yes. And guys, this is a bit of a gut feel type of thing. It's something that you get a feel for over time. What is fast enough and what is too fast? And the thing obviously that I just want to highlight is you can see the gray. I mean, this is typical. It's a black urethane tire and the dust is very gray. If you threw a rubber tire, this is all black crud. So I remove the removed material every now and then. Now the one other thing on the topic that of uneven tire truing, removing more from the one than the other. Tire raisers are incredibly sensitive to getting some of the removed material on this bed of the sanding block. If you get some of this material on there, as you move it backwards and forwards, it makes a thin little worm. And if that thin little worm is on this side will be higher, so this tire will be smaller. Is it a lot? No. Is it a 1/10 of a millimeter? Quite possibly. And there goes your 1/10 of a millimeter accuracy immediately. So keep it scrupulously clean. And every time you remove the block to remove some of the crud, make sure that it is clean. And when I say clean, there should be absolutely no swarf or, sandings on it, like nothing. Nothing on the bed and nothing on the bottom of the sanding block. It's a pain in the butt to get it cleaned off properly, but it is absolutely essential. And rubber, I don't know if you use a tire raiser as well, Wes, or what do you use?
I bought a Professor Motor style, and it's almost exactly the same, but it has an adjustment on one side, so you could stop how far you're putting your axle down, so you could measure your increments.
Okay, so it's.
I'll show you.
What was the unit that I used at your place, John? Are you still here?
That's the RSM.
Ach so, das ist eine deutsche Maschine, das ist eine Reifenschleifenmaschine.
Yes. Reifenstahl machine.
I really screwed up. I really screwed up on it, but John managed to correct my mistakes.
Actually, the name of the machine, Reifen, is German for tire. Schleifen is grinding. Machine is, I think it's machine.
Okay.
So
Schleifen machine.
No.
Okay. So what you do is it doesn't remove any material if it's not touching the sandpaper. Guys, I'm not going to do this whole thing meticulously now. I'm just going to demonstrate some of the principles. So I'll have to do the tires again tomorrow. But what you do then is, I now know it has to be, to get the diameter, when I first measured it, it was 21.8 for argument's sake. And it was 2 millimeters high, the car. I want it to be 1.5 millimeters high, so I have to remove 0.5 millimeters off of the bottom of the tire. Whatever you remove on the one side, you remove on the other. So you've got to reduce the diameter of the wheel by 1 millimeter. So I have to bring it down from 21.8 to 20.8. Does all of that sound logical to you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have to reduce the radius by 0.5 millimeters, so you have to reduce the diameter by 1 millimeter. So I have to get it down to 20.8 millimeters. So for quick and dirty, I mean, if you get the diameter within 0.2 or 0.3 millimeters of the desired, I tend to err on the large side. It really doesn't matter that much. So it is now down to 21.2 for argument's sake. So I'll keep on grinding and keep on measuring and grinding and measuring until it's probably about 0.2 or 0.3 millimeters larger than what I need. At that stage, I will start polishing. So remember I said it once earlier that you can actually get a pretty damn good finish with
320
relatively coarse sandpaper because of the design of the machine. Because you're moving the same irregularities across the width of the tire, you can get a very good, almost polish on it. The way to do it is to just take a very fine cut. This is more than what I would have done if I was taking time. And then all you do is you keep on for a long time, because you're starting to now remove a very small amount of material and very consistently across the width of the tire. Will you get the same polish as with a 3000 grit? No. Will you get a finish that I believe is probably good enough for club racing, not to bother with any more polishing? Absolutely. I would quite comfortably, but this will take quite a while, because you've got to get to the point where it basically stops removing material. I started with too big of a feed, so this can take more than 5 minutes. This I would do both for a case where I'm not polishing it afterwards, or if I am polishing it. If I'm not polishing it, this is what determines the quality of the finish that you're going to get. If I am polishing it, this will determine how quickly you will get rid of the remaining roughness with a smooth paper. When you go to 320 grit or 600 grit, it struggles to remove any material whatsoever. 320 is pretty smooth. 600 is very smooth. So it removes damn near nothing. It takes you forever to get rid of the smallest irregularities. So I would easily take, on the rubber tires that I did today, I probably took almost 10 minutes with this step. And it is, if you're polishing the tire, it is worth it 1,000 times over. Because if you start, this is still very rough. I would still do this for quite some time. But you can get it pretty darn smooth in this way.
Alwyn,
Yes, sir.
sorry to interrupt. Just a question, and it could be a stupid one, I don't know. Have you ever experimented with truing tires? You ever experimented with adding heat?
Heat?
Yeah.
Heat with rubber and urethane is the kiss of death.
Okay. It's just a question.
If you read people's comments on truing tires, one of the recurring themes, Jamie, don't go too fast, because you overheat the tire and you ruin the surface.
Right.
It won't ever grip well again. So that's why keep the voltage low, keep the feed relatively slow, and feel the tire. If it starts feeling even slightly warm to the touch, stop.
Okay.
So as opposed to adding heat, the whole principle is avoid overheating at all costs.
Okay. Fair enough.
So good question. I meant to comment on that earlier. I did not.
Do you use wet and dry then, water to keep them cool?
When I start polishing, yes. So the first cut with the 150, no water. The 320 is wet and dry paper. I keep it wet. So the next step is, say that I've sort of smoothed this now as well as I wanted to get it with the 150. The next important thing is rounding the edges. Guys, rounding the edges of the tires is just as important as truing the tire. Now that sounds like a huge exaggeration, but it really is. outside edges are square, you'll get bouncing.
Okay.
You see, Wes's daughter agrees with me. She also
But
said,
now, Wes, like in light of what Alwyn just mentioned about heat, like you're truing a tire in 30 minutes. Do you think there's a chance you might be overheating them?
No, I've been using a spray foam from Lordco, believe it or not, that has soap in it. I'll show you. I've been using this, and it keeps it a low heat. So I spray it on. It's a foam, and I keep feeding the foam with the soap. So it's cleaning, squeaky clean, and it doesn't get hot.
it's interesting. There's a couple of people on some of the forums that have been saying when they true the rubber tires, they actually use lighter fluid, naphtha, which is a slight solvent, which actually partly dissolves rubber. They use that during the truing process for cooling and removing the swarf, the grinding. I go, where you put naphtha on, and it gets sprayed all over the place. So I don't use, soapy water. That I'm okay with that. Naphtha, not so much. By the way, guys, I have a two-directional switch in my power supply because when I true the tires, I have it run this way so that it pulls into the notch on the truer. But I find when I do the edges, it's more convenient to have it turning this way around because I can get to the edges with a small piece of sandpaper more easily.
Now, John uses a disposable or nail file for this.
Yes, that is a very common practice. And if you use it right, you can really nail the right curvature. But I find it less expensive to buy. I buy sheets of sandpaper. So on this block, I just stick double-sided tape on the back of the sandpaper, and I cut strips to stick on here. And then at the same time, I cut little squares like this. So it's inexpensive and it's quite convenient. So what you need to make sure is that you properly radius all the corners on both tires. So it's inside and outside corners on both tires. And again, to do this properly takes me probably 5 minutes with the first cut like this. Because you want to be careful that you don't press too hard, because otherwise you end up with a very rough surface. And you don't want any roughness anywhere on the tire.
Is that 150 sandpaper all when you're using?
Yes, it is. It's the same as
Same.
so I cut it from the same sheet as that I used on the sanding block, Kevin.
Do you do that with the 320 then too?
Yes, I do. So I do the radius with the same paper that I use at that stage on the tread, the surface of the tire. So I'm not going to do it properly now. Suffice to say, it'll take me 5 times as long to do it correctly than what I've just shown over here, but there's no point in me have you sit and watch paint dry.
Yeah, but what if we want to?
Well, I don't want to do it. Okay. So now we're ending up with a lot more time than I've actually spent, and you've got your corners radiused nicely on both sides, and you've got the surface is now flat. Your tire is close to, within 0.2 millimeter or something like that of the desired diameter. Now I'm going to start making a bloody mess.
You know,
Well-
one thing that I've found really helpful with this, Alwyn, is the measurement and that sweet spot of the 1.5 millimeter of the chassis sitting above the track.
Yeah, as I say, it's a lot of proxies, Jamie, would have a height limit. They would specify a minimum clearance.
Mm-hmm.
Up in when we did the TT up in Kelowna, there was a minimum of, I can't remember if it was 1.5 or 1.2. And the guy measured the tire diameter. He was very particular about his track. He said he didn't want cars to damage his track.
Scrape his track. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and pull up, lift up the tape.
Mm-hmm.
So after every heat, he measured the cars. If a car was below the minimum height, you lost the laps of that entire half-hour heat.
Mm.
So, okay, that is unusual, but in proxies,
But still, yeah.
There are proxies that would say it has to be this high. If it's below that, you can't run the car.
Wow.
So simple as that.
Yeah, but also just from a performance perspective, you want your car to sit low, and but again, not so low that things are scraping. Because if things are scraping, it's going to slow you down.
Yes, and damage your host's track, which is a very unneighborly thing to do. Okay, now to Daniel's comment. Here we have a little Tupperware bowl of the regular tap water. So once I start polishing with a 320, I put a little bit of water, a little bit. This is the operative word, a little bit, because you want to prevent any water from running down the side and getting underneath the sanding block. There are two reasons for that. Firstly, it raises it slightly. Secondly, the block then sucks to the table, and it becomes very difficult to slide. It's like, a suction cup on a glass window. If you have some water under here, it just becomes a bear to move evenly and smoothly. And evenly and smoothly is rather important. Oops, the voltage is a bit high. And all that happens now is more of the same. And what's nice about urethanes is as you do this, with the water, the contact patch is nice and black, and then you'll see as you sand it, there's little gray lines that build up on the edge of the tire of the material that you removed off the tire itself. And every couple of adjustments down, feeding the tires down, I take it off and I clean off, because sometimes some of that material goes underneath the tire, and it's just, is that important? No, probably not. It's just because I'm a real pain in the ass. So you'll do this until you get the desired level of polish.
And you're not using Perrier water or any aqueduct water or anything? That's just tap water?
Yeah, I asked Perry for some water, but I couldn't get Perry.
Well, you go so fast. I don't know. I think that there's a special water you're using. You're not telling me.
It's holy water.
I'm blessed, yes.
Yeah. Guys,
Aqueduct water.
and just to give you an idea, I would probably with urethanes, I'll probably spend 15 minutes on this to get a decent polish on it. What I find acceptable. What I did with the rubber tires, I actually this last set, I probably spent over half an hour polishing it. Then I put some 3-in-1 oil on it and left it for half a day. And then I spent another more than half an hour polishing it to get it smooth. And then I cleaned it with the lighter fluid. So, and that was after spending an hour and a half getting the diameter down to where I wanted it and rounding the edges slowly enough that I didn't overheat the tires. So that's what
Okay.
I said. Yeah.
So lighter fluid is acceptable for urethane tires?
Yes.
Okay.
But what does a 3-in-1 fluid do? What does it do to the tires?
With rubber tires, it softens it.
Gotcha.
And you were talking about the rules specifically say thou shalt not. Well, I rewrote the rules, because how can you prevent somebody from putting oil on the tires and then polishing it afterwards? You'll never know it, you'll never see it. So in the Can-Am rules, what I said, guys, if you want to use 3-in-1 oil or NSR tire treatment, do it, but make damn sure by the time, clean it off properly afterwards with lighter fluid. Because if the car gets to me and it leaves a wet mark, the tires are wet, I will penalize you.
Mm.
Okay.
So the 3-in-1 treatment, is that only for rubber, or is that also for urethane?
Rubber only.
Okay.
Jamie, there is nothing that you could do chemically to urethane to improve the grip. It is chemically incredibly inert. There's the only thing that you can do with urethanes is to clean them.
Yeah.
I used to use alcohol, and then some of my tires started disintegrating. So why my drinking of the alcohol damaged the tires, I don't know. But then I went and looked at chemical resistance tables, and urethane is only partly resistant to alcohol. So over time, it will fall apart. So I no longer use alcohol to clean the tires well, but you can wipe them with lighter fluid, because it removes all the dirt, but it doesn't harm the tire. So typically what I would do with urethanes, after I true them and polish them, I'd give them a wipe with lighter fluid. But then again, I typically then also go and wash them afterwards under a tap with lukewarm water and dishwashing detergent.
Dish soap, yeah.
Any crud off of them. But be very clear, lighter fluid will not improve the grip of urethane tires. It will improve grip for a very, very short time, for a handful of laps on rubber tires. But the effect is gone almost immediately. So. Okay, so after that, we now have the surface nicely polished. So the next thing is then to remove all the roughness. And I would remove all this crud over here, because if you want to start polishing the radius, it just clogs things up. So I also have some trusty 320 grit little pieces of sandpaper. So run it backwards and
Dip it in the aqueduct water.
yes. And once again, I will do this until it is pretty damn smooth. What I try to do if I do it like this is to try and get as close to the kind of finish that you saw on that brand new out of the box Paul gauge tire with the, you know, as it comes out of the mold, nice and smooth and shiny. Now, I've gone backwards and forwards on polishing. Part of my, especially on rubber tires for proxies, because my first reaction was, why bother with spending all this time to polish it? The car runs up 25 laps and the surface of the tire scuffs up. What it appears to me is that if you really, really polish it well, the track almost becomes like a 5,000 grit sandpaper.
And polishes them more.
Yeah, because it's smooth. I mean, flat latex is somewhat rough and abrasive, but really not much. But what I'm beginning to suspect is if you have imperfections in the finish, that hooks onto the track and it roughens up the tire a hell of a lot more quickly than what would have happened if the tire was very smoothly polished. Otherwise, I don't understand why certain people's cars that have highly polished tires stay so good for so long. Is this a proven fact? No. But I'm desperate at this stage, so that's why I'm polishing the existing tires or the tires that I'm using for my next proxy car a heck of a lot more.
Alwyn, would you spend nearly as much time on front tires? Do you actually take the time and true your front tires?
I've recently started doing that, Jamie. And here the concept is a little bit different. This is the Capri that I showed at the beginning. This is what the front tires look like. I have to convince this. Now, it's hard to see here, but what I've done, you can see the tires are very much radiused around the corner with a very small contact patch in the middle. What you want to do, the accepted wisdom with front tires is to minimize the contact patch and minimize the friction. Therefore, these tires, I trued them, I radiused them heavily, you know, much more heavily than the rear tires. And then I coated them with clear nail varnish.
So you've, in effect, you've effectively made zero grip front tires.
I use zero grip, for preference, I use zero grip slotted tires as front tires. Then on top of that, I put the nail varnish on them so that the friction coefficient is like almost zero.
Yeah.
But that's a pain in the butt. So for normal purposes, I wouldn't do that unless it's a car that I really have some serious performance requirements of, Jamie.
Serious performance requirements also translate to a better acting car in our regular track use, like not necessarily for proxies, but every little bit counts. Like we're all out to get a few more seconds taken off our times, you know what I mean? Or half a second or.
Yeah, a lot of these things you're talking about tenths of seconds, Jamie, because it's really, so up to a year ago, okay, maybe a bit more, up to say 2 years ago, the only cars that I ever trued the front tires and radiused them was proxy cars. I've since started, if I'm tuning a car from scratch, I would likely true the front tires as well, because sometimes you can see the front of a car bouncing as it goes down the straight because of tires that are out of round. And that kills handling. The problem is that that is normally typically the case of cars with plastic wheels. And to get those front wheels on a truer is a problem because they don't have removable bushings. You know, typically you have just the axle going through the chassis and the wheels onto the knurled ends of the axle. So it's hard to remove them without damaging the wheel.
Yeah.
But even so, you know, those are typically the ones, plastic wheels are not as round as metal wheels to start off with. So those are the ones that can get the greatest benefit. So with a little bit of very careful pulling the wheels off and making sure that you try and push them back the same way that they were on, it does help. It definitely helps.
Good to know.
But if you were to ask me what percentage of my cars for regular use I've trued the tires, 10%. But I'm slowly.
But now it's kind of a standard thing for you if you're doing it from scratch.
Yeah, but I'm not buying as many cars anymore, so it's so it'll take me at this rate. I should have the last one done up by the year 2143.
Excellent.
Hey, Ellen,
Yes,
how do you keep the glue from going off? I don't sand that many, and I've had trouble. You glue one pair of tires, and by the time you glue the next, the bottle's hard. I've tried putting it in the fridge. Doesn't really work. Any secrets?
The root cause of that problem, Ross, is you just don't have enough cars.
Yeah. Okay. I'll just have to buy more cars.
Yeah, you just have to glue and true more tires.
Yeah, well, yeah, I got to buy the cars to put them on. So the problem solved, Alvin. Great.
This container is actually pretty good, Ross.
It is.
It doesn't go hard. Well, I probably go through a bottle in a couple, 3 months.
Okay.
And it definitely doesn't harden in that time. So that's another one of the advantages of those little squeeze bottles. I really like that that packaging, the format, you know, from resistance to hardening and the ease of application for tires.
Okay. Sounds good. I'll bring my tires over.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, these tires don't look like much now, but at least we've covered the principles. And I actually did a cheat sheet of what I wanted to cover. And let me take a look at my cheat sheet.
How you doing, Murray?
We're doing okay, Ross.
Good. You're sitting there quite quiet and peaceful. Just good to see you again.
Murray is one of those people that he doesn't do this kind of stuff, and then he's still faster than us. The rules don't apply to him.
That's right. That's right.
There's a newbie on the block. Wes is starting to kick my butt on a regular basis, so watch out, boys.
Stop telling all the secrets, Murray.
Yep, I got Murray's secrets, and you guys are in trouble.
Not on Perry's track, we're not.
I just follow you guys for fun.
On Tanix, I got to say I'm a little bit worried when racing starts again. But yeah, it's all good. It's all fun.
I'll follow you on. I draft you for fun. It's called draft.
Guys, this sort of covers what I had in mind for this evening. I looked over my cheat sheet. I pretty much covered everything that I had written down. So
Let me ask you this, Alwyn, if I may.
Mhm.
No,
Yep.
Go ahead, Daniel. Sorry.
I say no, you can't ask it.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to anyway. If you were to buy a new Truer, what would be your choice? Would you stick with the Tyre razor, or would you be looking in a different direction?
I would go with a Tyre razor again.
Okay.
I had a hoodie, and I could never make friends with it. It just I couldn't. I had some issues, and clearly the issues are of my making because a lot of the top tuners use hoodies. So bear that in mind.
Hoodies are good truers, but you can only do one wheel at once, I seem to remember. I mean, so that's the beauty of the Tyre razor. In theory, the Tyre razor, you should get both wheels to the same size.
Well, yeah, but the hoodie works on a gauge, so it gets them both to the same size also, from what I understand.
Yeah, within the accuracies of the adjustment, Jamie, and there are some problems that I had with getting the axle parallel to the bed, because if you don't do that, then you're never going to get the tires flat on the track. And with a stop, I don't think it's bad per se. I just don't think it's any better than the way that I've got my tire razor set up to equalize the tire sizes.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
And it's a schlep to do one wheel at a time. And the other thing that I like about the Tyre razor is you can take Scalextric plastic, the plastic wheel axle out of the back of the car, and you can plonk it in here and through your tires, and you can stick it back in. You cannot do on axle truing with a hoodie. So that, to me, because of my mix of cars, I think this covers the biggest gamut of
So it's a more versatile machine, yeah. In that respect. And how much do the Tyre razors cost? Like if I were to buy one?
When I bought mine, it was something like 140 US. I don't
140 US, $100 for shipping, and $300 for exchange.
Yeah, they're about the cheapest decent truer that you can buy. Hoodies, if you can find them, are like $250 plus US.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this isn't a sophisticated piece of equipment, Jamie. This is about as basic as you can get. But I think for normal people's use, I think it's good. It's good enough for me.
And then it's also versatile, Alvin, because you can machine out the inserts for the plastic wheels and stick them in there. I don't know if the hoodies or whatever it is are that flexible. It is quite a good machine.
Yeah, I love it. That's why I say, Jamie, as Jamie asked, if I had to buy a Tyre truer now, knowing what I know now, would I still do what I did then? And the answer is yes, I would go for a Tyre razor again.
Good to know. Yeah.
It's the only one I've ever used, and it's so easy. It's the only one I want to use, really.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely not as sophisticated as a hoodie, but with a little bit of care and attention, I believe you can get comparable results.
Yeah.
No, not with a little bit, with a fair bit of care and attention.
See, I don't even need to true tires very much, but I'd like to get into it more. So that's why I asked. It's probably something that I'll be buying at some point.
It's the easiest tuning thing you can do, Jamie. The simplest, the easiest. Really, there's no buggering around with lead and running the thing and stopping and moving things around. It's such a worthwhile thing to do.
Yeah.
Decently glued and true tires are the biggest single performance enhancement that you can do to a car.
I think you've mentioned that numerous times, Alwyn, so I'm
Yeah.
starting to understand how important it is.
So easy.
But it's a lot of money. Well, it's 2 cars.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, 2 cars. Yeah, that's really not much when you think about it.
Worth the investment.
Yeah. No, I'll tell you guys, I can't say enough good things about Paul Gage. That guy is awesome.
Yes.
I ordered some tires from him the other day. I went on the online store. I opened an eBay account, blah, blah, blah. It wouldn't accept my payment. It didn't want me to buy the tires. So I sent Paul an email, and he set it up and sent me a direct payment for PayPal that I paid with my Visa, and it ended up $5 cheaper than what it would have been on eBay. But the guy is stellar. Like, if you email him, he'll be back to you within minutes.
Paul is just one of those all-round nice guys.
Awesome guy. Yeah.
I met him a couple of times in person now already, with the TT races and stuff like that.
Yeah.
He's just a top guy.
Yeah. Well, and his product is nice too. His tires are always good.
Does he normally only sell through eBay, or does he sell normally from his home?
I always buy directly from him. I send him an email saying what I want, and like Jamie said, he sends me a PayPal invoice. I pay it. He sends me the tires.
It probably works out better for him as well, I would think.
Yeah, no eBay fees.
Yeah.
You see, his shipping costs went up, and it just annoyed the hell out of me that I was thinking if I could buy straight from him, I would.
And you should.
Yeah, okay, I'll do that.
Yeah, just send him an email. If you need his email, I can send. What's that?
What's his email?
Give me a second, I'll tell you.
Put it in the chat.
Let's see.
What was that, Daniel?
Put it in the chat, and so we're not copying it, not handwriting it down and using it.
I'm just trying to find it here. Paul Gage. Paul Gage. Paul Gage at gmail.com.
Oh, really?
Yep. PAUL. No, Paul G. Gage. Sorry. So PAUL GGAGE at gmail.com.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, if you send them an email and tell them you're from GVSCC, I mean, it doesn't hurt to say that. I don't think it really makes a difference, but it's good that he knows which club he's dealing with, right?
Yep.
But yeah, super guy, really nice guy. I hope one day that I might get to meet him. He's just a good guy.
Okay,
he lives in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
Yeah, but otherwise he's quite normal.
Yeah.